There it goes. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 49th episode of Celebrating the Brand Ambassador. I'm really excited to be here today with two of my old work colleagues, some of the senior Masters of Whisky of Diageo, former at this stage, as we are all former brand ambassadors from Diageo. So both of them had extremely successful careers, but I am going to read a little bit about them because their backgrounds are so extensive that I thought I would introduce Marcy and Steve Beal. So, and Marcy, how do I pronounce your last name?
Rudershausen.
Ruderhausen. I love that. That is such a great last name. So Marcy Ruderhausen, you were the first woman to become a Master of Whisky at Diageo. You were one of the original 7 to earn this title, leading to a very successful 20-year career, which is amazing, at Diageo. Well, MKTG, or US Concepts, as we all did work. In 2008, she was awarded the Coastal Sales Consultant Supplier Partner of the Year. 2009, the Coastal University Trainer of the Year. Served as Diageo's media spokesperson, led the Johnny Walker Journey National Program, which tasted and educated over 60,000 people. You were the co-host of the Whiskey Network, an online national training program. You have trained the travel retail staff in over 75 airports worldwide, which is incredible. You also are fluent in both English and Spanish. So that's one of the reasons why you got the job in travel retail. But it also meant you got to help launch the Classic Malts Whiskey Selection in a 5-city media tour across Mexico. And so much more. I can keep going, but I thought that was some of your, I was like, all this, and we can talk about Marcy all day and the incredible accomplishments she's done. And then along with her is Steve Beal. Steve Beal is one of the most respected whiskey experts in the world and one of the most awarded. When I was looking through your CV, Steve, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of awards in there. So you were the senior brand educator for the whiskey portfolio of Diageo for over 15 years. In 2010, you were inducted as a life member of the Keepers of the Quaich. And I know, Marcy, you are a member of the Keepers of the Quaich as well. In 2015, you were inducted into the Whiskey Magazine Hall of Fame, alongside people like Bill Samuels of Maker's Mark and Al Young of Four Roses. In 2016, he received the U.S. Bartenders Guild Life Membership Achievement Award at Tales of the Cocktail. And on March 31st, its most recent year, in 2022, the San Francisco World Spirits Competition and Tasting Alliance created its annual Steve Beal Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yay!
To honor spirit, this award was created to honor spirit industry legends, and he gave the award to him as his first recipient. So, and there are many other things that Steve does, judging and many other things at USBG, but the Lifetime Achievement Award from San Francisco Spirits is pretty epic. So well done, Steve.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right. Now that I've introduced these two incredible people, I want to dive right in because, as we always do in the show, the first part of the show is we talk a little bit about people's past and how they got to be where they are. And then we talk about some best practices in business. And what we're going to do a little combination of everything today, a little bit of personal, a little bit of business. So I'm going to start it off. This is a question to both of you. You were both former senior Diageo Masters of Whisky. One of the first Diageo programs, ambassador programs that Diageo ever had. It's the one I always envied. I really wanted to be part of it because it was so good. This program was the first of its kind, taking a lot of former actors. Steve, are you a former actor as well?
Well, not officially.
Okay. Fair enough. Love that.
I think as a priest, there's a lot of that acting abilities that are inherent in what you do in presentation, right?
Wait, have you been a priest this whole time?
Oh, yeah.
Always. You've always been a priest.
40 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. So I learned something. This is normally I'd find this out beforehand. That's incredible. So taking a priest and a former actor and many former actors and transforming them into whiskey experts. So can you break down for me what was the original intention behind the program and how the ambassadors were chosen? Because it was something really unique. I don't know if I start with Steve or Marcy. You guys choose.
Marcy, what do you go?
Okay, I'll give you my understanding of it, and then Steve will come in and blow it up even more. So you know Evan Katnack, right? So he was one of the first whiskey experts coming to the U.S. and presenting whiskey. And from my understanding of how the program came about was that they realized that he just couldn't do it all by himself. The reception of the classic malt collection was so well received that they decided basically we need a little Evans to be able to be out into the market, which makes sense, right? And I think most of us were already working as brand ambassadors through US Concepts for the brands. I think most of us were. There may be one or two that came on from the outside.
And Marcy, you started off as a promotional person like me.
I did. I always say I was a promo girl. That is how I started, because I was studying theater and I was acting and I was doing commercials at the time, but there was always that need for a little side gig, right? That's the actor life until you hit it big. And a couple friends were doing promotional work with the company and said, "Hey, come on, this is great. Awesome." I think I was the one. Promos.
Steve, you were a promo girl too?
I was. Let me just say that I got this strange phone call that Johnny Walker needed a guy with a kilt. And a guy named Jasper Riggs, who Marcy knows, who lives down in Florida, was the market manager in San Francisco. And I didn't know, but I had a kilt and I could, fake a good Scottish accent if I needed to. And the next thing I knew, I was jumping up on top of gay bars, giving out coupons for Johnny Walker Red Label in a program called Paint the Town Red.
I remember that program.
Yeah, and it was probably the first Johnny Walker program that Diageo did with promotional ambassadors. They were very careful not to use the word brand ambassador, but we were. We just did our thing, and it was a lot of fun. And a couple of the other guys with me, there's a guy with a couple of them with bagpipes, and we just had a lot of fun. So I was a promo model too.
You were a promo model. Is that the one when we all used to run into a bar? It was you just ran in, you had the bagpiper and 5 people, we'd run in, and the girls, but we'd all be handing out drink tickets and you guys would be in your kilts, and then we'd hang out for an hour and then we'd fuck off.
Right. Absolutely. It was a lot of fun.
That was so much fun. I was one of the promo models that I remember doing those. Those were a great time. So this is where the program says. So everybody we all had a little history of working for the company before we stepped into other roles. So Marcy, sorry, I cut you off there.
No, that all plays into exactly what it was. That's what we were doing. But then there was this need to elevate it a little bit, and the need for education. Which is what Evan was doing. And so it was the Scotch Ambassador program really is how it started, the Scotch Ambassadors, and we were doing that. And then they wanted something a little bit more specialized. And then the Masters of Scotch started. And that was when the 7 of us it was reduced because there were other people doing Scotch Ambassador roles. I remember our first trip to Scotland was everybody. And then they wanted to create a more specialized group. And so we all went in and auditioned for the role. And I remember, it's so crazy, I was doing a play in Key West when they decided to specialize the program. And the audition in New York was on a Monday, which of course in a theater, that is the one day you have off. So I was talking to the producer and said, I really want to go and do this. And it's on Monday. And they were fantastic. They said, absolutely. But we had to do a presentation. So I decided that I was going to talk about food and whiskey. So Sunday night after the show, I go into the producer. She lived in the Keys. And I borrowed her kitchen and I made a whiskey cake. And it was in the Scottsfest 98 or 99 book. It was just a recipe that was there. So here I am Sunday night in Key West making this whiskey cake. And I traveled Monday from Key West holding my cake to Miami, to New York, I think I was the second to the last person because I got there so much later than everyone else, and whipped out my whiskey cake. And I always say I baked myself into a job because then I cut up my little cake and I served it to everyone, and it was delicious. So there's a strategy to these things.
There's definitely a strategy. That's a way to knock their socks off by just showing you made a little extra effort too. That's amazing.
Speaking of knocking socks off, Rick Edwards, who was one of the original 7, he's been brand ambassador.
There he is. He's just saying hello to us.
Oh yeah, good old Ricky. He's been brand ambassador for just about everybody at some point or another. He's probably one of the top people in the business. But Rick, you're gonna hate me for this. We all had, it was not like 110 and 100, 100% humidity in New York, and we are all having to wear our kilts, and they are not cool warm weather attire, so we're all just like dripping sweat, and we're getting up there doing our little thing talking about whiskey, and here's Rick showing up in his kilt, which was, I think, a former Catholic schoolgirl skirt. And he was wearing hush puppies and some gym socks with stripes on the top, and it was like, I thought Evan Kanak was going to die, absolutely die. But Rick is so personable, so funny, so good at what he does. They just couldn't help it. We got to have Rick. So Rick was one of the original 7, but it was a comic opera. We all really bonded as a group, I think, for the first time at that event. Yeah. Because it was very stressful. First time they'd ever done anything like this at all. And Diageo was a little weary about it. Always they brought the older guys from Scotland with the accent, and the whole 9 yards, and trotted them around the country. And this is the first time they were going to let the locals actually get involved in it. And Rick had been, his biggest claim to fame, I think, he was the bartender on Young and the Restless.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that. So
I remember he was on Martin Duffy's show recently, and I saw his interview, and when he still had a beard. So I saw he had a beard, and when he shaved it all off, I was like, whoa, it's like a whole different human. But yeah, he talked about that he was the bartender on there. Such a great start.
I mean, so many of us from that first group were, from theater, which seems to be the one of the factors that really makes good brand ambassadors, because you understand storytelling, you understand how to create the beginning, the middle, and the end of what you are presenting to someone, and you understand improvisation, which I think for Steve is also being where he was coming from, is being a priest. It's those skills, right? You never know what someone else is going to say to you, and the best of the best will be able to take that comment and either shine the light on them or take it away, depending on what that person is trying to get, right? Because sometimes it's just the early on for me, it was a little bit more of the, hey there, little lady, who do you think you are talking about whiskey, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I would get intimidated at the beginning because but then it took some time. But once I got into my own, then I could see what they were doing. It's like, all right, you seem to know a little bit about, why don't you tell everyone? Yeah.
Good for you. You turn it on them.
Part of the challenge is always to stay on script. I mean, everybody loves to talk, and people who love whiskey have all kinds of stories and everything. But I think part of being a brand ambassador is, you're not there to promote yourself. You're there to speak on behalf of the brand and the company and the company's reputation. And in the case of Diageo, the hundreds of thousands of employees who are paying for their kids' education and putting food on the table. And it's a big responsibility. And staying on script is one of the top things on my top 10 list of what a brand ambassador needs to be able to do.
Did you guys get provided scripts? Like, so when this program was created, just go back to the question a little bit. So when it was created, because I do remember you guys starting off in kilts, and then you guys moved to a Marnie suits, I think it was, or something of that nature. And I believe there was scripts.
Hugo Boss.
That's what it was.
Hugo Boss, Elaine.
Hugo Boss. Sorry, different designer. And you were given scripts. Didn't you have scripts because you had to use them for different events?
Well, there's a certain, there's certain talking points. It's just like being in politics.
Mm-hmm.
You're always asked to make sure you stay on the points. Now, we were given a lot of, because we like to talk, a little bit of room to work around that. But generally, staying on the script is always about timing. We traveled all over the country to all kinds of major cities and talked to rather large groups of people. We do a thing called the Journey of Taste, and a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of us often tag teamed it. I used to go around with Marty Duffy and do a lot of them. And it was a show. You were on stage with a giant PowerPoint, and everybody had half a dozen samples of whiskey in front of them, and you had an hour to get it done. And sometimes you had 2 or 3 shows a night to do. So
Wow.
you really, really trim it down and make sure that the conversation. Then you always get some crazies and some people who have too much to drink, and but I think one of the challenges in the beginning was we were talking to a 95% male audience 20 years ago. Marcy was excuse me for using the word, but the only girl on the team. And I think it had to be very intimidating for her. Just because, what are you doing up there, lady? I
Mm-hmm.
saw that. And, she would wow them. And of course, by the time we were halfway into this, 4 or 5 years, we've been to Scotland so many times together and done so much training and visited virtually every distillery known to man. We'd all become the experts the company had sort of hoped that we would become.
Yep, that's amazing. That is incredible. That must have been really intimidating, Marcy. Sorry, people are talking outside my door, and I'm just trying to tell them to stop talking outside my door. Yeah. So, because it's very loud in here. Can you hear them speaking?
No.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So no, I agree. I think it was one of the most incredible things you guys got to do, like especially traveling to all the different distilleries, and to do the Johnnie Walker journeys. I remember working some of them myself and seeing you guys present on stage, which is exhausting, and when you have to do it 3 or 4 times. And also, Marcy, not to keep on the girl train of because I know I hate that question, like why is it like to be a woman in the industry?
But it is a reality back in the day that it was, and there were a few other women doing some of the other brands, because I remember meeting them at a few events here and there, but it was minimal. But I will say early on, and I wish I remembered the year right now, I really wanted to do a whiskey. We called it like a whiskey 101, but it ended up being a journey. So it was the 3 of the single malts that go into making Johnnie Walker Black Label is how we presented it back in the day. Mm-hmm. And so the team at US Concepts got behind me. Nicole Tilzer was my manager at the time. Mm-hmm. And so they said, okay, we're going to do this. And so I actually did a Johnnie Walker journey for women. Whiskey 101 for women is what we called it back then. At the Ritz-Carlton out on Key Biscayne, and I had 100 women show up and 2 dudes. We couldn't kick the dudes out because we didn't do that back then, but they sat in. But we had 100 women show up, and it was so exciting, and it was just so invigorating. And it really, I always remember that event, especially because it just gave me that confidence of, no, we're doing the right thing. Because especially in the Latin culture in Miami, women, if your father drank whiskey, you drink whiskey too. It wasn't, oh, that's a man's drink. We never thought that way, just weren't raised that way. And so the reception was incredible. Even my mom came, and she doesn't drink whiskey at all, but she took her little taste. Okay, that's nice.
That's incredible. That must have been an amazing event. And it did start to break down the barriers and realize that because the marketing was always like, the target audience is 28 to 40 years old and they're male. And I'm like, I drink whiskey. A lot of women drink, like, when are we going to start targeting this whiskey? And I think it's finally happening. So I guess that was an event to start breaking down that barrier, which I think is amazing. But I do want to talk about one thing, because you guys, you were a priest, Steve, and you were an actress, right? And you guys worked as part-time kind of brand ambassadors, promotional models, as we did for US Concepts at the time, and KTG it became. But still, your whiskey training in the beginning was probably, you received whiskey training, but to transform you guys into masters is an incredible thing, right? And there's a lot of people out there who want to become whiskey brand ambassadors. So what about the program, do you think was incredible, like that got you to the level where you both are today? And what would you recommend for other people who want to become whiskey experts? Steve, you want to start?
Oh, we had a really serious syllabus, and we would go over to Scotland. We'd be on a bus together, and it was 24/7. In fact, we were at the Cardew distillery one day, and we had almost went on strike. They had made us work so hard. Marcy will remember that. And it was just constant. We were even on the bus, at breakfast, we were working and working and working constantly.
What were you working on? Like, give me an example. Like, what do you mean by work? Like, you guys were working the skills? Like, what were you doing?
Asking questions and being asked questions. And Evan would run, we'd have these quizzes, and we actually had a coach with us who was a speechwriter for President Obama.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we had a real professional team with us on the bus, and we did that numerous times. Eventually, the program morphed when we became Masters of Whisky into a real concerted effort. Some of the masters did internships at distilleries, and a lot of them got their IBD credentials from Heriot-Watt University, their distilling credentials, and really, really, Francesco Lafranconi in Las Vegas always says, "We're not drinking, we're learning." And I think that's one of the things. You have to constantly be absorbing what's going on around you. And mentorship is what we do. And it's mentorship that brought us there. We had people like Evan, but a whole lot of other people in the business who chimed in and joined and trained with, people at Crown Royal, people at George Dickel, people in, all kinds of different places. And we had a lot of cross pollination, if you will, with other brands, because at Diageo, there's such a huge portfolio. You may be the whiskey expert, but if you have an opportunity to sell a little Don Julio or a little Smirnoff or a little Tanqueray on the side, you did it because you were valuable to the company, because you kind of kept yourself open to that. And I think if I were telling a brand ambassador today, that's one of the things I'd always recommend, is just don't be narrow-minded about it, because knowledge is power and power is money, and you become a valuable asset to the company. That's why the program, I think, lasted as long as it did.
No, absolutely. And do you recommend, I mean, the fact that you guys got to go to the distilleries was incredible. I mean, I think it's essential that you have to really absorb something to be able, you have to see the brand home. And I think most people would agree with that. I know I had a fight to go to because I represented the Reserve brand portfolio, and Diageo had trying to change their travel policy. So I had to kind of like sneak on to like press trips and things of that nature. And I was like, hey, there's a press trip. Can I go? Because I need to get to this, Zacapa distillery or Don Julio to go. Because it wasn't like part of our DNA. You guys were the only ones that got to go for a long time to distilleries and do tours. Everybody else, he was like fighting tooth or nail to get the budget to be able to go on that. So, because I think it's really important. So for those who want to be a whiskey ambassador, is it, if they go to a distillery, you can't just meaning you should, make appointments, obviously, but is it spending days and time there? Is it, how do you, because if you just go on a tour, obviously you'll learn some things, but you need to to really get to understand whiskey. What do you recommend if somebody's just going on their own and they're an ambassador and they're like, I just want to learn a lot about whiskey. I'm going to go to Scotland tomorrow and start visiting distilleries. Any recommendations?
I mean, personally, I would say definitely set appointments up in advance, and because then they know who's coming, and the folks at the distillery are amazingly gracious If they know that, you know, especially if you work for a company and you're going on your own dime, they would be incredibly gracious to invite you in and to give you that special one-on-one tour so that you're really getting the information personally, so you can ask questions to extend even more what it is that you're learning. For us back in the day, something that I always feel was so incredibly valuable was we did the multi-advocate course in Scotland, as well as the Johnny Walker Journey course. So there were specific courses that Diageo had that we were able to take part in, and those were a few days. And that was serious study. I mean, that multi-advocate course was serious whiskey study at all levels. So those early on were incredibly helpful. And then in the end, also, it is all about self-edification. If you are not studying your ass off yourself, you're leaving a lot on the table. And there was a lot of just self-edification, finding things, studying, reading as much as you can, creating. For me, you know, coming from theater, I always thought, as I mentioned to you, I thought of it as a one-woman show. When I first,
I love this. Explain more about that. I thought that was great.
Okay, I'm going to create a one-woman whiskey show. That was my plan. And so in taking all the materials and reading it and learning it, how can I make this a performance? How can I take people on this journey with me, create the beginning, create the middle, create the end? And it was just like, you know, and at that time, it's like, hey, give me 2 weeks to learn this, because that's how long we rehearsed the play for. We rehearsed for 2 weeks. Of course, it is still taking a lifetime to still continue to learn all that stuff. But at the very beginning, that was the plan for me, to create a staff training. That was the goal I was given. You're going to do staff trainings. Okay, this is how we put it together. And from there, the evolution has even more grown.
A lot of these things we did have been turned into boilerplates and become part of the whole genre of ambassadorship. There's a dozen training programs out there about whiskey, things like Moonshine University, which is one of the best ones in the bourbon world in particular. There's a whiskey ambassadors course. A bunch of people have written some books about it that are really good. There's some great textbooks on whiskey. I won't take all the credit for it, but a lot of that germinated from our work of things that we created. The whole USBG Master Accreditation Program really sprung forth from the training program that we did inside the Masters of Whisky. It's very much, you know, how do you get it? Because in the beginning, there wasn't any way to do that. Marcy mentioned the multi-advocate course. I was in one of the very first ones before we were Masters of Scotch or Whiskey. It's kind of how I ended up. I think 1998, I went to Scotland, and we were at Royal Lochnagar in February, and there was a blizzard from hell, and we were all trapped in this 5-star resort near Royal Lochnagar Distillery with some of the rarest whiskey in the world, and with people like Dave Broom and Charlie McLean and Nick Morgan and Jim Beveridge. We couldn't go anywhere, so we had to drink all this expensive whiskey in front of the fire and watch it snow outside.
You know, Nick Morgan told me about this. I had a conversation. It sounded like, I can't believe I didn't realize you were there too. I think you said you were there.
It was, and from these things, all kinds of things developed in terms of mentorships and training. And it was just incredible to be there at the start of all of it. There's the Council of Whiskey Masters, for example, that have a great educational program. Robin Robinson has written a book on how to be an ambassador and about whiskey training. So a lot of stuff out there. So you learn as much as you can, you go. But I think probably the coolest thing, I did this whiskey event for a Jewish temple in Beverly Hills. It was Larry King's temple that he attended, and was out on private home on the tennis court with the best kosher buffet I've ever had in my life. And I'm there talking about whiskey, and Johnny Walker was the sponsor of it. And Larry King gets up and he says, there's a bunch of rabbis there and a priest. He says, and 5 rabbis and a priest walked into the room. And he says, doesn't that sound like the beginning of a great joke? And it was just, but Larry King had this philosophy. He said, you want to be somebody, you want to do something, find somebody who does what you think you want to do and attach yourselves to that person and follow them, follow their career, follow what they do. Spend some time with them if they'll let you. The downside of that is Larry told me that one of the people who took his advice was Rush Limbaugh, but that's another story. And he told me about the time that Rush Limbaugh spent with him doing that for a week. And of course, you know where that went, actually, but it's a successful plan. You find the people who inspire you and figure out what it is that inspires them and learn from them. And I think in my case, it's always been the mentors that I watched in the whiskey business, in and out of Diageo. A lot of contact with lots of other companies, and done a lot since I retired for a lot of other companies. But it's very, very much, that's where it comes from, because you can know everything. I tell people, for example, every brand ambassador begins with a program that tells people how you make whiskey. And I get news for you. Everybody does it the same way. 10% of whiskey lovers out there, if you're lucky, care about it. All right. We start with grain. We add some yeast, a little bit of water. We throw it together. We put it in a still and then throw it in a barrel. Every whiskey made, that's the definition of it. Now, that's about 10 minutes of something interesting and an hour and a half of boring if you really want to get on it. So it's all about how do you inspire people around that? Because there are always differences in how we do it and how it tastes. And I'm a great one to argue that there is terroir in whiskey. Otherwise, they wouldn't taste different. But it's always finding the inspiring person and getting inspired.
No, I love that. I was gonna say the only thing I was gonna add to that was it's definitely something I've always done. Is like looking at somebody that I admired, but the one thing I would add is also making sure you find, it's great to admire them, but then you have to figure out your own path, because you're never going to be them, right? You're never going to be exactly what they're doing. So you have to figure out your own personality. It's like, or else you suffer from imposter syndrome for the rest of your life, because you're constantly trying to aspire to be that person. At least for me, that's my own personal. I realize I was always, so it's like I realized I'm like, I need to find my own personality and my own way of doing things, because I'm never going to be that person. They're already them, and they're already doing their own style, and I can't replicate that style. All I can do is follow their career path and learn all the things that they learned, and then figure out what is the thing that identifies me as me, and do it in my own way. I don't know if that's true for all of you.
I think it is very true. Very, very true.
It's part of it is also part of the educational process, right? Is the old everything I learned needed to know I learned in kindergarten, in how to learn something, but then to take it and make it your own. It's perfect.
No, I think that's essential. Well, listen, wait, you started talking about this, Steve, and Marcy, you kind of started leading into it about, because part of the job of brand ambassadors, a lot of their jobs is giving trainings, right? And I've sat through good trainings, I've sat through amazing trainings, and I've sat through some really awful trainings, where the person is dull as dirt and they really can't express themselves. So do you have, and Marcy, you started talking about this before, and Steve, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. Like, you have a philosophy, and Marcy, expanding upon what we were talking about, the one-woman show, of how you believe a training should be delivered to keep the audience attention, to make sure they walk away with information they can actually utilize. You want to expand upon that, Marcy?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to, being an actor, having that theatrical experience. And yes, this is the information that I need to impart, but I also have to be really considerate of who's receiving it. Right? Being aware of your audience being conscious of, are they still with me? Am I losing them? What do I need to change? That's where the flexibility of knowing your material so well, it's so ingrained in you that you can go this way to come back on the path to keep the audience with you, right? Because each audience is a different animal. And you might be doing the same presentation that you've done before, and it's been super successful in the past. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in front of a group and they are not with you. So you have to be attentive enough to that and know your material so well that you can deviate, get them on track with you, find a way to bring them into you so that you can then continue. And that just is a lot of consciousness and knowing your material to the core of your being. And that's sometimes if I'm seeing some presentations and you're listening to what people are saying, it's like, it's really not something you can just, it's the old, I heard a bartender say recently, oh, I can do that. I do that in my sleep every day. It's like, well, it's not the same. It's not the same when you have to present what you're doing. Yes, you can be behind the bar making cocktails and you do them really fast, but you don't actually tell the people you're making those cocktails for how you're making it, what's in it, and a story about the brand. All those other layers of understanding. If you did not rehearse your presentation, you just screwed yourself, right? Because it's not the same. It's so much more than just that. So
no, I think that's a great thing, because so many times I'm like, I can just wing it. No, my best presentations are always when I have to sit in a room and I have to say the presentation out loud. I've been at Tales at a Cocktail and I've had to kick Philip out of the room because I'm like, I need to practice and I need to say it out loud. I can't say it in my head, because every time I would say it out loud, I was like, oh, that doesn't sound right. And, when I'm saying it out, I need to change that bit or that bit. And then it does stick. And you can always tell when somebody hasn't rehearsed. But also, you also said something interesting yesterday when we were chatting, which was, or the day before, the days are all melding together, which was, when you went to travel retail, people would say, wanted you to keep coming back because you actually gave them practical knowledge. So can you expand, like, what did that mean? Because you were training very specific staff. So what in those trainings that you do to accommodate that particular audience?
Right. So my main task was educating not only we had brand ambassadors in practically every country island. So I covered South Central North America and the Caribbean. And we had brand ambassadors at most of the top airports. But we also included the sales staff because they're so incredibly valuable. And, it's such a huge market and so many different brands. My way of thinking was that it is my responsibility to educate these folks on the category first and foremost. Like, if you don't understand the category of whiskey, I can give you all these talking points about my brand, but that's all it's going to be. It's just going to be a talking head. And what I wanted was for those people to give them something more than just some bullet points, right? Because that in many of those countries, those are really great jobs, right? You might think working in an airport but it's not, they're feeding their families with this job. So for me, my responsibility was to really teach them about the category first and foremost and learn the category through my brand, but understand what the entire category of whiskey is. And sometimes I would, also train on some of the other brands. So it was like about rum or about tequila or about gin, making sure that the category was there so that they had something that was going to serve them beyond, but always through the brands and the talking points. And that created incredible loyalty, right? Because other people that would go in and train, it would just be a very narrow focus for them. But the idea of broadening it and making it a full spectrum for them was one of the most valuable things.
That makes a lot of sense. You're arming them with knowledge so they can do their job in entirety, not just about your brand, but about the portfolio, about the category, so they could have an intelligent conversation. Right. So that is a really valuable
loyalty, right? Which in turn instilled the loyalty to them because they knew that when I came, the managers knew, that I was going to give their employees much more than what they were expecting.
No, I love that. No, I think that's a great lesson, because as a brand ambassador, if you become, I always teach people, if you can become an asset for that bar or that bartender or that owner, as somebody, as a resource of information for them and knowledge, they will stay loyal to you. Every time a menu changes and things of that nature, like whenever I did brand trainings at the bar, we would do bartender training. I would create a menu for the bar, and then I would always ask the owner, I was like, I know you can't give me 100% of the menu, because that wouldn't be cool. Me giving them an entire Diageo menu meant that they couldn't work with other suppliers.
Right.
So they always appreciate I understood that part of the business. So I would say, okay, what are the other brands that you need on here so that you can run your business properly? And they'd be like, well, I need a William Grant's cocktail, and and I would create the cocktails. I was like, they would walk out of there with a full menu. And they would have others. I was like, this will work with this brand. This will work with this brand. I would give them cocktails and put them in. And what happened was, those bars would come back to me every quarter for a new menu, because they knew that I wasn't trying to be greedy. I wasn't trying to own their entire menu. I understood they had a bigger business, and I became an asset to them. So I think that's exactly what you're doing. You became an asset that was bigger than just the brand itself, which is, I think, the right way of doing business.
Yeah, I think more so than anything, it's that have the integrity to do what is right for them, not just for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being thoughtful, which is something that Steve has always done so brilliantly.
Yeah, Steve, what are your thoughts on this? Like, what about training and being an asset to a bar group or a bar?
So I always felt that everything you said is true. We have to be ambassadors for a category, for an industry, not just our own stuff. That's a challenge, because our companies want our talking points communicated. Sometimes they get a little nervous, when you're a Johnny Walker person and you do something nice for Chivas. It's not exactly at the brand office, not exactly the best thing you do, but it's really important to be seen by the people you're dealing with as someone who is credible. And being credible means giving credit where it's due and being positive and lifting up, like the rising tide that floats all boats. I think the important thing to me, though, and Marcy said, understanding who your audience are. If I was doing bar trainings, for example, and did thousands of them, I tried to engage my bartenders, not just giving them information, but finding out where they were coming from, what they wanted to do. And lots of times I found letting them do a little bit of shine themselves. I have two great cocktails out there that were kind of the result of this behavior. One is this silly cocktail called the Revolver, made with a particular bourbon, where I'd simply ask John Santa, the bartender, make me a cocktail. How would you do this? And he got out, he said, I'm going to pick 3 ingredients we know we have. That's important for making a cocktail, is not having people spend a lot of time and a lot of effort finding ingredients and making their own thing as much as it is being able to do it. And he put this thing together, and it was this beautiful coffee flavored Manhattan. And by the end of the year, it was on over 400 menus worldwide.
Wow.
And he gets embarrassed John does, about that cocktail. Another one is, you always got to remember that somebody in that room is clever and creative and talented, and maybe moving on up. And if any of you know that great guy in Southern California, Eric Castro, I knew Eric Castro was a barback.
Wow.
When he was in the back of the room, and he created another great bourbon cocktail, the Kentucky Buck.
Oh, I love that drink.
It's just famous.
Simple and brilliant.
Simple, famous, easy to make. And it's very easy when you engage with your audience and bring out the best in them and their own creativity. they actually get wound up in what you're doing. They become a partner with you in what you're doing. At the end of the day, their success is their ability to communicate. If they're salespeople, particularly, they're going to be judged and gauged by their employers by, how well they communicate. And at the end of the day in the liquor business, it's always about the numbers, as much as I hated that. Always about the numbers. So you've got to find where they are. Now, I've seen very bad trainings spit back PowerPoints. Here's the point. We had a Diageo regional sales meeting, one of those quarterly things you do, and we share a distributor in California with another very famous large producer, and they took up most of the time. And our sales director got up. This is just before Christmas, and he said, "I'm going to give you a Christmas present. Go home." Never even presented the PowerPoint.
Wow.
Yet our sales went through the roof. So it's very much about being in the same place with the people you're with, and kind of and again, engaging them. And if you're not doing that, you're not communicating. I've seen these glazed over, I once did a presentation for an outfit out here called Beverages and More. They have 100 and some stores, 200 stores maybe. And they had all their managers from everywhere in the same room. And it's like, we do a lot of this. And it was the very first time that I'd ever made a presentation to this group, and glazed over, we have to be here. We could be doing something else, out stocking the shelves and, or whatever we could do, and it was like, and it took 20 minutes to crack that ice. Yet,
what do you think cracked it? What do you think? I mean, I know your knowledge probably cracked in your personality, but
I love jokes, and I would find some jokes, but I would do like I do in a sermon, and that is, people sometimes find this offensive, but I would kind of target people in the room that I knew, and I wouldn't necessarily call them out by name, but I would kind of relate personally to what I knew were questions that people had, or challenges that they faced, or somehow get them all involved in the conversation by telling me, what do you want to get out of this? What do you want to happen? If we leave today, what can I give you? I did a series for liquor.com, whiskey and other brands. It's like Canadian whiskey in 60 seconds or less. Like, what do you need to know about Canadian whiskey? Because the person who's there in the Safeway or the Beverages and More, the Total Wines of the world, or the Benny's in Chicago, they got a minute to talk to that customer. So what would you have them say? What would you have them say? So we did the series of these cartoon videos about 8 or 10 years ago. And that came from that. It's like these salespeople want to know, what can I practically do? Because I can't sit there and give you an hour-long presentation on the parts per million of peat in this particular type of Scotch, and what type of barley and what type of yeast. And I may know the master blender Johnny Walker, but they don't care about that. They want to know, does it taste good?
Right.
So it's a really question of understanding, and so that's kind of where I'm at with it.
No, I think that's all really, really great advice, and it is a lot of, and engaging your audience is definitely key. And as you guys both alluded to, catering the message to the knowing who your audience is and catering it to it. So it could be the 5-second spiel, but it's the information that they need to know in order to want to purchase that product, or be able to have a conversation with their friend, like, oh, I picked up this Scotch. Here's 3 things I know about it, or bourbon, or here's a cocktail I can make with it, or the sales rep. So no, all really, really great facts. I want to talk about, so getting off the topic of training, but getting more back into how this industry works, because there's a lot of brand ambassadors out there, who either work directly for a company, work directly with a brand, or they even work within an agency, but they still work directly with the brand manager on a one-to-one basis. And all of us worked for an agency, right? And which was good and bad, right? Because it separated, the good part was it separated you from the client, which gave you a layer of protection sometimes, at least for me, because then they couldn't just like ask me a lot of things directly. They had to go through my boss, which filtered a lot of the bullshit out. But the other part is, I want to make sure I don't forget my own point, is that they're going to lead to a disconnect, right? There definitely could be a disconnect where things happen within the brand. The brand manager change, which happened at Diageo often. Every couple of years, they would switch or a new person would come
18
on.
months.
What?
18 months.
18 months. Yeah, it was such a strange policy. They would move all the people around, and suddenly your whole world has changed, right? So it's suddenly like you were doing, the program was working one way, and then now it's not. So, and I'm sure other people are suffering this right now who have, who work for agencies out there who might have this disconnect. So, can you both speak to what problems can arise when you work outside of the company and work for an agency, and what you think maybe how this could be solved, like what they could actually be doing better? And also if you have any recommendations for anybody who's might be having this problem right now. Marcy, you had some, I'll start with you because we had some points we were talking about the other day of just what you wish could have happened sometimes when changes were made, and because you guys were disconnected.
Yeah, one of the things after all those years that seemed to repeat itself was that when someone new came on, I would say most of the time, there was maybe one or two that didn't fall into the pattern, but someone new would come to manage the brands, and they would have all these great ideas of how they were going to change or change the program, take over the program. And here you have this incredible wealth of knowledge of this team that's going to be at your fingertips. And they would never come and ask us, I want to do this. Have you done it before? Has it worked? Do you think this will work? It was just implement something. And that was one of the things that I just wish that they would gather and say, so happy to be here with all of you now. This is my plan. Have you done anything like this before? Because so many times it would happen and we would be there like, we did that 2 years ago and it didn't work.
Right. You're reinventing the wheel.
Do the thing all over again. And so really trusting that the people that are in place, that especially in the program after being there for so long, not be, I'm assuming that a lot of them are coming in there thinking, I have to prove myself. And if I ask you, I'm not proving that I'm worthwhile I'm here. When in reality, taking the guidance and the information, or just checking in with the people that you're going to be commanding, to check in with them and see if these plans have merit, or do I need to rethink it? And that was one of the things that I always felt.
Wish that would happen. Yeah, no, that's a great record. Steve, you were going to say something?
So,
There's we would have saved a lot of money and time.
A constant revolution where you're reinventing the wheel over and over again, and sometimes repeating yourself. This is an anecdote. It's a little touchy, but I sat in a meeting with a lovely person who is a new Johnny Walker person with us at one point, and she made this very impassioned speech about, we're going to do this and this and this with Black Label. We're going to make it the next Grey Goose. Grey Goose was a up and coming, big time brand. And this person didn't realize that the ad agency who had created the image for Grey Goose had said when they launched it, we are going to make Grey Goose the next Johnny Walker Black.
Wow.
It's always there's this tendency to do new, now, next without relying on the corporate memory. And the thing I loved about being with us was we were there for 15, 20 years. And so we were like the brains. We knew all the history. We knew where the bodies were buried. We knew what worked. We knew what didn't. And we were very successful with brand managers who were willing to listen to us. And maybe not so successful. I don't think we ever had a problem with anybody. They were all good people. But you have a resource and you use that resource, and you ask the questions. It saves a lot of time. And I think the brands I worked with that were the most successful were the ones that had some longevity, where people were in charge for a while,
Mm-hmm.
where they valued, what you brought to the table. It as I got older, I was always older and older and older than most of the people I was working for, or with. So it was always, some of them sort of respected that, and others sort of, I felt sometimes a little bit dismissed. So there was this disconnect there as well sometimes. And it's a challenge when you work for an agency. The agency insulates itself from the client,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want you talking to the client. Now, with the Masters of Whisky, we were embedded for the most part at Diageo. We had offices inside the Diageo buildings. We worked with the
Wow.
local Diageo manager, so we were really there, and you had to bite your tongue a lot, because the client, Diageo, would love to get all kinds of information,
Mm-hmm.
that we shouldn't be
You have to
sharing.
stay loyal to the agency that pays you. That's the one thing. I
Yeah.
definitely know that some secrets got let out by certain people. I was like, you got to remember the person's actually paying your salary. You shouldn't be revealing all our dirt.
It puts you in a situation, but the I guess another really key word for brand ambassadors is loyalty. You got to be loyal to the brand you work for, and loyal to the people you work for, loyal to the principles, or find another job, because there's just no room for this triangulation. And I think getting caught in a triangulation is the downside of all of these brand ambassadors jobs. And it's the one that quickly leads to finding a new job.
No, I can agree with that. I mean, I was gonna say, I definitely believe in being loyal, but you also have to be loyal to yourself sometimes. Because Philip always said, he's like, you're the most loyal person in the world. He's like, and I was, to the point where I did stupid career things because I was like loyal to the brand, and loyal to the company. But I realized I was screwing myself, because they didn't care. They didn't, they did care. My people, I've worked with some amazing people who took very good care of me. I can never complain. My career was amazing. So, but also at the same time, you're an employee. But you are correct in the fact you need to be loyal. I think you have to be loyal to the people who are paying your salary, making sure you make them look good, and then loyal to the brand. You should never talk shit about the brand or any other brand, because you also never know where you're going to end up working. You never know what the next job is going to be, and where that brand manager is also going to go next.
Mm-hmm.
They might end up at a different company, and suddenly you're working for them again. So you really have to be true to the people you are working with. But I was going to say, recommendation wise, sounds like you guys working inside the offices is a great thing, because being in the corporate office, and that's some of the things I recommend to some of the people who do work for an agency. I'm like, get to the corporate office if you can, at least once a quarter if you're not in the same city. If you are in the same city, all the time. Like, I made sure I was behind the Diageo bar often, because that's when I would actually get to see the brand team, and I would get to see the brand managers, and we could have those one-on-ones, and I wasn't so disconnected from the brands, because if I didn't go there, I probably would never see them or hear from them. So that was something that was really, I realized was really essential to my job, was to make sure I had that FaceTime often, so that I could be part of the process.
I did the same thing with the duty free. Sorry, Steve, because I was out on the road all the time. But I would try to go, and I would try to go on Thursdays when it was happy hour. And a lot of times they started teasing me, "You're just here for happy hour." And like, no, well, yes, but it's also very strategic, because that was the one day a week or one every 2 weeks that I could get the business done I needed, but then also socialize and build a relationship. Because if you're not building relationship with the people who are setting you up for success, there's a huge piece of the puzzle missing, right? If you can build good relationship, whether it becomes a very good friendship, with most of the times it did, or just an acquaintance, is fine. But there was trust, and there was the loyalty, and the relationship had a way of supporting everything else that you did. I knew that everybody had my back, right? There was very, very, very few instances when, if I doubted, right, I'd say Susan Strom and I used to be my boss, who's today one of my best friends. Whenever we would get together, somebody's name from the distributor would come up, and it was always, oh, I love that person. Oh, me too. Oh, I work with so-and-so. Oh, I love that person. Oh, me too. There was never anybody that we, it was always just because when you ride in someone's car with them and, all you have is the radio and your conversation, you're either singing songs together or you're talking about your personal life. And then, you just want to support that person. You want to make sure that they're getting everything that they need. So that just goes back to that, whether it's loyalty to the brand, loyalty to your distributor, right? They're going to know that you have their back. And
absolutely.
It's so valuable.
Absolutely. I think that's all great words. But Steve, you're going to say something?
Well, again, it pointed out a bit of the dynamic. It's like I would get a call from my agency manager in New York saying, why aren't you out in the field? And then I get a call from my local manager at the office in San Francisco, you're never here. You're always out in the field. It's like there's always sometimes an opportunity for misalignment of priorities as well. I mean, we worked a lot in the on-premise business, building bar business, getting placements, training bartenders. But at the same time, the local office wanted me to sell in a bourbon to Safeway. And I get a call saying, what are you doing that for? You're supposed to be doing the on sale. And I said, well, we just signed a $3 million deal for the company with Safeway. Shall we just send them a check and say, forget it? Because you get this kind of, again, misalignment. And I think brand ambassador's job is to be an ambassador and negotiate the diplomacy.
No, I think that is a great point, because it is you do have to build at a point, and there was that misconnection sometimes. Like the brands would call me directly, and they wouldn't go through my boss, so they would be asking me to do this or go to a certain state, and I made the mistake sometimes of not telling my manager and just the brand team told me, right? So when I was young and naive, and I quickly learned, nope. No matter what the brand, I'd be like, could you just make sure to send this email to my boss and my manager in the office so they know that you've asked me for this particular thing? Because you can just go rogue because you're on your own all the time, and you're getting, especially in the beginning, well, it must be right because the brand is asking me. But then you realize, like, yeah, but your boss didn't tell you to do this. So, and they are the last stop on the train, even though they're getting paid by the client, or as Rick said, he liked to refer to people as the team, which is very true. To make sure you always CC your boss and make sure whatever the brand is asking you, that somebody in the home office knows that they're asking you this, and just being like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. Okay. I definitely got in trouble a lot for doing that. I would forget sometimes, and I would just go rogue. Even in my more senior years, I was like, screw it. That sounds like fun. I'm going to go do what they ask me to do, because at the end of the day, they pay the salary. I would ask for forgiveness instead of permission. Yeah.
That's how it works.
That's how it absolutely works. So I do want to talk about now, because we're coming onto the hour. And Steve, this is a question for you, because you are and this is a little more personal on a personal level, because you are the second person in this industry that I know is currently battling pancreatic cancer. I know you said you really want to speak about this because, being a second person within the industry, it's like, is this something that the industry should be aware of? Like, is this something that we should be getting tested? Like, how did you know? Can you just tell us a little bit about your story?
I had a bad tummy ache and was misdiagnosed with indigestion. Take some Tums and you'll be okay. And it got worse, and it was pancreatitis. And pancreatitis ultimately has ended up as stage 4 cancer. Wow. It's a hard cancer to diagnose. The pancreas is hidden. Your pancreas runs your liver, it runs your spleen, it runs your kidneys, it runs your stomach, it runs your whole digestive system. So you're a brand ambassador, a bartender. Probably your diet and the way you take care of yourself may need a little work. And I'm pretty sure that's contributed to it. Now, I do, this mutual friend of ours we were strangely enough diagnosed with the same thing about the same time on the same day for almost the same reasons. And once they know you have it, it's almost too late. I had a 10% chance of surviving a year, and I'm
Wow.
now a year and a half into it.
Wow.
And I had a terrific surgery. Our friend had the same surgery now last week. I've had 10 different kinds of chemotherapy, $4 million worth of treatments. Literally, I'm still here, and I will, after we're finished today, go get hooked up to an IV for the rest of the day to get a little more juice to keep going. But it's working because I'm an experimental treatment program that our colleague friend told me, check this out with the Pancreatic Action Network. And so we're both actively raising funds for them right now, doing things like that. So it's a tough thing, but pay attention to your body, pay attention to your health, pay attention to your diet. I don't think alcohol helped this. I didn't have a particularly heavy drinking lifestyle anyway, but at the same time, I can't help but think it does contribute to it. Cancer in general affects people in the hospitality industry at a much higher level, higher rate than it does elsewhere, just because of our hours and our diets and our the way we live,
Mhm.
and maybe a little higher risk behavior sometimes. Um, Generally speaking, this caught me a surprise because I never thought of myself as a chronically ill person or, anything like that. And it's been a tough, really tough last year and a half. In some ways, I'm very thankful for COVID because I was traveling all over the world, um, training bartenders in Australia, for example, in Taiwan, in India, judging competitions in the UK and in Europe and South Africa. I was really enjoying my job before COVID hit. In fact, I was just flying back from China the very week that COVID
Wow.
um, went through Hong Kong airport with a flight from Wuhan. Uh,
Wow.
I mean, boy. Um, so I was really, really busy and having a great time. And then all of a sudden I had this tummy ache. And wasn't too long after that COVID hit. So COVID has sort of forced me to take care of myself. And, it's deprived me of the things I was really looking forward to most in my retirement. Uh,
Mm.
and just
I
as I
can
think I'm getting back into it, I should be going to Italy next week for a redesigning Marsala wine conference. There's a great Irish whiskey that uses Marsala casks to
Mhm.
its product. And they invited me to that, but I can't travel for that now. So, I'm
'Cause
so
you
sorry.
have COVID right now.
I do have COVID right now.
Well, I do because we talked about something that was not humorous, but a little bit humorous. You cracked me up because I think people are very uncomfortable sometimes having conversations when they find out somebody has cancer, and they say things that are just dumb. Um, you and they dumb, and you actually put something on your Facebook one time about like here's some things you should say to somebody, and here's some things you shouldn't. So could you share some of that, like things that people, maybe things you should say and maybe things you should never say to somebody who has cancer?
So it's really sort of tough because you don't know what to say. You're confronting your own mortality when you meet somebody with cancer. You don't know. It's an unknown thing. But I've had, oh, so do you have the good kind? You know, and is there such a thing? you know,
Oh
ask,
no.
and then you want to be helpful. So it's what can I do for you? How about nothing? You know, um, it's hard to have a conversation. I think with me, I love normal conversations where I don't have to talk about whatever treatment and surgery, and how is the radiation going, or one of the things people do often is everybody has a friend who has cancer, so they share their experience. So, oh, you still have your hair. Yeah, I guess, or it's amazing. It's amazing what sort of random crap comes out. I don't care. I think what I want people to be is honest. If you feel bad and you're sad, fine, tell me. That's okay. You're happy, fine, tell me. That's okay. I want to know what your life is like and what you're doing. Don't particularly want to, and strangely enough, people talk really slowly to me and loud, like I can't hear, or, or do you need some
Seriously?
help with that? Like I'm not crippled yet, but it's like, it's amazing. Just amazing.
So treating somebody normal, I think probably the hardest one is asking somebody, because your normal question to anybody, when I see Marcy, I see anybody, the first one is, how you doing? And when you know somebody has cancer, it's like, I can't ask that question. So what do I ask? Like, how's life? Well, all right. I don't know. So what is the question post, when you somebody, because it is, right? That's the hard one. It's like, because I feel bad. I'm like, I shouldn't ask that question to you because I know how things are going. So that for me, I guess that's one I know I struggle with.
I think it's just this really strong Buddhist thing in me that says, be mindful.
Mm-hmm.
Just think about what you say a little bit, and be heartful. You be honest. I think we survivors, cancer survivors, spend a lot of time helping other people survive our cancer when we are given that opportunity, because people want to know. You really want to know. You're curious, and
Yeah.
by being curious, you may actually get yours diagnosed before it's too late, or you might find a treatment. By being curious, we might be able to help you, and or you might discover something about yourself. But it is hard because every conversation you have always has to somehow begin and end with, so how long you got? It's like, what stage are you? It's like, really? Do you really need? It's so it's
Wow. So you've gotten some good ones out there. There was one you did some. I don't know if you want to share it about your collection, which I found was hilarious.
Oh, everybody supposes that I have this enormous, valuable whiskey collection, which I do.
I was going to say, I think that answer is yeah, you do.
Anyway, it's like, one of the questions is, so you're not drinking anymore. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, that one cracked me up. Like, what are you going to do with your collection? I was like, wow, they're really going. They're going hard. Like, how are you, Steve? What are you going to do with that whiskey?
I've heard it more than you imagine. I mean, really, honestly, I'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for sharing that. I think that will be also really helpful for a lot of people to hear and to understand a little bit better. I know we've been talking for a while, but Marcy, I also didn't have a chance because I really think this is an important question. You worked as a travel retail brand ambassador. You're the first person I've ever met who's ever done that job. I don't know how many. Are there other people doing that job out there right now?
There are actually. Yeah, there are a few. I've met a few over the years. I think it may just be at a different level or a different pace, I should say. Maybe not necessarily level, but a different pace than what when we started the program. And it was just myself. It was all about training. and I was doing airports and cruise, and it was just way too much. And so after a year or two, I don't remember, they brought someone else on to just cover the cruise industry. But there are other people from other brands that are doing something similar. I don't think to the extent that I did, because I did cover all of the Americas.
Right. So what was your responsibilities as a travel retail brand ambassador, you know, as a master of whiskey in that role?
I think most of the time the biggest job I had was travel agent to myself, because that was one of the most complicated things, was organizing the travel and the trainings with the individual airports, and really being strategic in how I was coordinating them, and a few times having to go from one country to the other. So then it's like, okay, just how much product will I need, and all of the training materials and cups and paper goods, and you know, if I'm taking a little gift. And so it is an incredible job of coordinating and organization. I mean, organization number one. And then, as we were talking earlier, creating a training program that I could either use for all of them or adapt as I went along, but being really conscious of what it took to coordinate all that. But my main job was training, staff
And
training.
it was the staff that worked in the retail stores,
Sales,
right?
the brand ambassadors in the airports where we had them, which is pretty much the only airports that I went to. I maybe went to another one here or there, but really it was wherever there were brand ambassadors, because it was also empowering the brand ambassador to then take what I gave them and have them be the person that the sales team went to, right? I wanted them to be the person that everybody thought as the expert in their market, because I'm only getting there 2 times a year at the major markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll come in. So I wanted that person to be the most experienced in that airport, so that everybody else saw them as their, you know, this is the brand ambassador for Johnnie Walker, and that's the person in power.
Wait, give me so there was a brand ambassador just assigned to the airport?
Yeah.
Really? That was their whole job. They worked in the airport.
Yeah.
So they worked.
They were a very high-end salesperson.
Gotcha.
And they concentrated on the Diageo brands, and not just the whiskeys. They concentrated on the whole category. So sometimes I would go into a market and I would administer, brand knowledge to them across the board of everything. But depending on what the focus was for the sales team, which usually was whiskey, because it's inevitably is the more complicated category, right? And so that was usually the main focus was whiskey. And then we started including some Zacapa and Don Julio, and all of the other things that
I had no idea that job existed. Well, I guess it's funny because the title brand ambassador kind of means so many things, as I've learned from doing all these interviews. Like you could be a brand ambassador, but you're really, you're a market manager, or you're a really high-end salesperson in a retail shop, but you are the brand ambassador.
Right, because the role in the airports is nothing like the way we have it in the US, let's say, as we see a brand ambassador locally. They definitely, it's more of a high-end salesperson. Like, they are hand selling all of the reserve and the luxury goods, just like you see for leather goods and perfumes and all the different categories in airport. They all now have a specified brand ambassador, which is just basically hand selling all the luxury goods.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I've never seen.
It's a tremendous investment, right, for the company. They're investing a heck of a lot of money and energy in creating all of those things. Is the duty-free world is massive, right? It is a massive market. We're introducing new brands, but also growing brands specific only to duty-free. So when people are traveling, they're looking for something that they can only get there. It is a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah, I wonder now, because of COVID, if travel retail is still going to be. I mean, the airports were empty for so long. They must have took a massive hit.
A big hit. I actually, my last training was the week before COVID hit. I was in Puerto Rico training some cruise ships, and had some trainings that following week set to for the launch of the Virgin Cruise Lines, and it was actually the 17th, the 13th or the 17th, whenever everything shut down. It was like that next day I was supposed to be training on the new Virgin ships in Miami, and it just never happened. And then after that, I realized, I don't want to do this anymore. The traveling was hell. It was exhausting, being on 2 to 4 planes a day. Everybody says, oh, what a cool job. It's like, yes, I do love what I do, but it is exhausting. And I want to travel because I want to travel, not because I have to travel. And so COVID was, as much as it was a curse, it was a little bit of a blessing to just take the time to step back and think, okay, what do I really want to do?
Yeah.
And now it was high up there. It was like, I want to retire. I have a very tropical backyard, so I just want to grow my plants. And after a few things that happened, I realized, no, I'm not ready to retire. I really enjoy the next generation. Really, it's supporting the next generation. Who's coming up? What do they need? How can I impart some knowledge to them and help grow them? And I was lucky enough to fall into USBG.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Let's talk about it. So both of you guys could have retired, if you wanted to. And what do Masters of Whisky do when they retire? What's the next step in your career? So for you, you're USBG, and I know, Steve, you have a lot of stuff going on. So Marcy, talk about the USBG gig you have now.
Yeah, I've been a member for a few years, and I was looking at the newsletter, and way at the bottom there was a little notice of program manager for world class, and I read it and I sent it to Diana, who's my best friend, and I said, "This looks good for me, right?" It's like, absolutely, go for it. And it just worked out nicely. So I'm the program manager for world class. I'm still learning the ropes. It's a massive program, but obviously it's a program that I'm well aware of. I did some judging for it when we first started in cruise. So I just understood how it worked. And the folks at USBG have just, swooped me up in their arms and are being really gracious and letting me still learn some of the ropes, because it is a big program. It's only been a few months now, but I'm really enjoying the interaction. We're right in the middle of regional competitions right now. So it is a lot of travel, but I know it's a specific amount of time. But getting to watch bartenders work and how they take the brand knowledge and incorporate it into the program, it's just, I feel very fortunate that I did find somewhere where I can, I'm feeling really good about it, so I can still contribute to the industry. I just didn't want to leave the industry, honestly. I knew what I didn't want to do. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do.
Right.
And I think that's half the battle. Sometimes if you know what you don't want to do, that is also a really good beginning, which allows you to open the doors to look at okay, what else is out there? And I didn't know this existed, right? I didn't know it was a possibility. There, it just appeared. And so I'm really excited about it.
Congratulations. I know we saw each other, and I'm going to see you again in Portland and Chicago. We're doing our own little personal tour. So congratulations. And it's great that you were able to tie in what you were doing before into what you're doing now, because, world class is, was part of that. And Steve, like, you retired, what, 2015?
Yeah. And I did quite a bit of traveling around for USBG, doing all the regional conferences and judged some world-class events. One of them is in Hawaii, which was all my world-class people, they've all become winners.
Love that.
True.
It's great. And they're like my extended family. And I started getting calls from various companies and entrepreneurs and people developing brands saying, so you're retired. Would you like to do a little something for us? And so there isn't anybody I haven't worked for basically on a consulting basis. And then traveling with the John distilleries in India and Kavalan in Taiwan and in Australia. Spent a lot of time in Australia doing that. And then I've been judging at most of the world competitions, spirits competitions, which I've done for a long time, but that's really been, now I get to go to South Africa and stay an extra week or
Nice.
Stuff like that. It's been kind of fun. And started international drink specialists with some of my European colleagues. So we have this sort of collaborative, it's kind of a cooperative endeavor where people who do what I do or write about spirits or judge in spirits are all kind of together, and we recommend each other for various jobs and connections. I'm working on a special Japanese whiskey right at the moment for one particular company. I've helped do an Irish whiskey or two, and a lot of Australian. The Australian whiskeys are really about to hit the big time. They are amazing stuff. One of them, Starward, I think, took like 15 major medals at San Francisco for their products. And so single malt, American single malt, incredibly taking off, like just crazy. And
I judged a lot of those at ADI too. Yeah, there's so many great ones.
The interesting piece that's developed that I didn't see coming was, forensic evaluation. Various people have bought into lots of whiskey that are alleged to be a particular vintage year of a particular, lots of it's bourbon. And I will get a sample, and I charge a lot for this, so it's good business. And people say, is this really what they say? And, about half of it isn't.
Wow.
That's
incredible. Who knew that was going to be a gig?
There he is. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought? I look forward to it, though, because sometimes it's real. The only way I'm going to drink this $5,000 whiskey is if somebody sends me one, because I'm certainly not going to go out and buy it. So it's been kind of an interesting trip, and that piece has kept going. Marcy judges with me at the World Whiskey Awards. She's done that for 4 or 5 years, and we gather to. That's part of the World Drinks Award scheme, which covers the whole gamut of every type of distilled spirit by category. And we have met periodically at Jack Rose in Washington, D.C. to get the judges together to judge American whiskeys. And that's fun. It just, I get to do what I want. Sometimes that's important now. So being retired means I just do what I want. Basically.
No, I love that. And it must be nice also after you've worked for the same company for a long time to now see how other companies operate as well.
Well, it's amazing to me. I always say there is life after Diageo. Diageo was wonderful to me. There couldn't have been a better company treating me more honestly and fairly in every way. But there's a lot of people who used to work for Diageo who took their expertise, their brand knowledge, what they learned, and have gone to work for other brands. So there's a Diageo alumni group out there, a huge one. And I'm always running into them, doing some work for some of them, and really enjoying that. It's always easy for us to sort of put the blinders on and talk about our particular brand, but we are really part of an amazing industry. That's my other family, my spiritual world.
I love it. I love it. So there's definitely life after Diageo, and you guys are both excelling at it. So we're going to wrap it up now. And I always ask the last question, which is basically any last words of advice for those who aspire to have a long, successful career as a brand ambassador in our industry. Marcy, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I've always said I never knew what to wish for myself when this job came about, because as we said, I was doing theater at the time and I kind of grew out of that. And this came about, and it was either say yes and try something new, or keep going where I was. And I decided to say yes and try something new. And so I would say, keep yourself open to the possibilities of things that come up. A lot of things that we mentioned today in, loyalty and commitment. It's a job, but wouldn't it be so much nicer to do something as a job that you become very passionate about, which is what happened. So take it seriously. As much as we're having fun doing this, the serious side to it is you really have to study. You really have to learn all this stuff, whether you get opportunities to go to other places, which I hope any ambassador is given that opportunity to go and see where their brand is coming from, because that is really valuable. But so much of self-edification is so crucial to it as well, right? So study your brand, study your category, get to know as much as you can around it, be committed, be loyal, and be open to the possibility of anything that can come your way.
Love it. That's great advice.
Don't burn bridges.
Don't burn bridges. Agreed.
Yeah.
You never know where those people are going to end up. A lot of my old Diageo people are some of my clients. So yeah, definitely never burn bridges. Steve, and you?
So I think the most valuable piece of learning that I ever got really is the advice I would give, and that's just be mindful of every single human being, be respectful for them. I had one of my mentors would come to visit us in San Francisco, where we had 4 floors of employees, and he would come in and he would make a point of shaking the hand of everybody in the building and learning their name. And by the time he left at the end of the day, he knew the name of everybody from the regional vice president clear down to the matron who took care of the bathrooms for us. And if he came back in 6 months, he'd still knew their name. He treasured and valued every single person in the business, regardless of how important or how much they were paid or how much they knew or what job they did. We're an industry where we do that, where we take care of people, where we provide jobs, where we also help people have tremendous opportunity to be creative, and also, where we can show off, and it's the Diageo and me saying, please drink responsibly, but we help people have a good time every day in all the world, and it's very important to me to realize that that's a bigger thing than just making a cocktail or pushing a bottle of whiskey. So thanks very much for having us. Really.
Thank you. And your friend Alan said something very nice in there.
Alan.
Exactly. No, those are great words of advice from both of you. And it's really been a pleasure to have both of you on. It's been great to catch up with you as well. So thanks again for taking the time to share all your wisdom. And I look forward to seeing Marcy, you on the road in Portland, and Steve, hopefully soon somewhere over a whiskey, whether it's judging or something else. But please keep in touch, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Elaine. It was great.
And thank you, everybody who tuned in today, and for all your comments. It really means a lot. And if you miss any of the show, it actually will be online on YouTube forever. But it's also on Facebook for 2 weeks. And then eventually it gets converted into a podcast. So you can find it at Celebrate the Brand Ambassador, the podcast. So you can catch up some of the older episodes. And I'm releasing each one each week. So, but thanks again, everybody. And have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.